Turn it off. We're not going there. Welcome back to another episode of the Deductionist Podcast, my lords, ladies and gentlemen. It's lovely to see you. It's nice to see that Mr. James was about to read a book himself. So this podcast episode is well placed. I know the world is going mental at the minute, but we are doing our best here to try and be a port in the storm of kind of normalcy, of as focused on the things that we can do as is possible. Do you all like my shirt? It is a custom-made shirt. I got it for my Secret Santa, as well as my little puzzle that I made. I mean, I only created the puzzle. I didn't make it, if that makes sense. So let's look at reading. Right, it's no secret that I love to read, and so let's talk about a few ideas as to how we can take the practice of reading into practice of these kinds of Sherlockian skills that we are working on. Right? It can't be understated that for this particular discipline, it needs to be brought around with purpose and intention. And it isn't something that will go in, vicariously. Just, they certainly do. But these aren't things that will go in just because you've read the book. There is a specific difference in what we look at for how we will utilize these things versus just understanding the material or getting to grips with the story, if it is that you're choosing to read a piece of fiction as well. Because with it being a book can be fiction, non-fiction, whatever you want. It is how we craft our mindset around the material that makes it work for us. Now, reading can train observation when you force specificity. Big, heavy word in that sentence. It can train observation. Think of the concept of you see but you do not observe from A Scandal in Bohemia. Modern life, as it's moving forward at the minute, it rewards scanning. Right? Your brain then adapts to scanning by becoming good at, getting the gist of things, and then bad at the detail, the nitty-gritty. Shows up everywhere else, like with missed cues in people, sloppy recall in investigations, shallow comprehension in conversations. Reading it's not the only thing that can, by any stretch of the imagination, but reading can reverse that drift because the page is stable. It waits, and that stability lets you practice precision, right? So if you think about the simplistic angle of the science or sciences that are involved, deep processing, it strengthens memory and understanding. So when you actively look for specific features, you encode more richly, and therefore you are able to retrieve more reliably. Observation practice doesn't depend on, good content. It depends on the task. A trashy thriller can be an observation gym if you treat it like one. So what I mean by intentional practice is before you sit down to read whatever it is that you're about to read, pick one observation target, as in a sensory detail. What is being described and what is absent. A behavioral detail for what people do under pressure maybe, or a structural detail, as in how the writer is trying to guide attention through the story. And then you can take an exercise from that with 2 minutes, more or less. So after you've gone through a page, write 3 sentences from memory. One concrete detail you can point to, one inference you made from that detail, and then one detail you expected but you didn't get, really. Now that's observation becoming a habit. That's not specifically how, but that's one of the base premises I use to try and tackle Cain's jawbone. I'm still working on it. Right, life gets very busy, so I don't really have a lot of option to sit down for the length of time that I want to and focus on this kind of murder mystery. But that's one of the ways that I took it, because it's 100 pages printed out of sequence, so you take a page at a time, and boom, the details seep in. Reading can therefore become a reasoning practice when you delay certainty. If you think of the man himself, it is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data. People form opinions really quickly, especially nowadays, because the environment itself pushes for speed. The cost on the other side of that, though, is error. Premature conclusions, sticky narratives, overconfident takes. Reading lets you practice holding judgment without freezing. You can stay mobile. You can continue collecting data, and you can still move forward. Comprehension is it's an active process. Good readers, they generate hypotheses and just revise them as they go, as new information arrives. That revision skill transfers into real world thinking. So any text can give you a stream of data. Your training is learning to separate what the text states, what you assume, and what you feel in between all of those things. So if you take some intentional practice to a 3-column page, and then after a paragraph or a scene or something's gone by, you jot down the data points of what is literally there, then what you think it means, then what should happen next if you're right. You are practicing disciplined inference, not just vibes and that disgusting G word. Mr. Jane says, so is it about connecting the data after finishing the chapter or even the book? Oh, it all makes sense now, kind of thing, rather than focusing on every sentence and connecting them while reading. But I mean, in a nutshell, in a nutshell, it depends on what you're training for. So if you're training for observation, we kind of pace it out. If you're training for the critical thinking angle and the inference angle and the reasoning angle, then you can kind of pace it with significant pieces of information. You can pace it per chapter. You can pace it per page. You can pace it per paragraph. These types of things, it's really down to how focused you are when reading and the capacity that you bring to your reading experience when you do as well. Some people can only focus for 10 to 15 minutes at a time. Some people can sit and read all day. It's not a yay for them or doesn't it suck for them. That's just how they are at the minute. Their capacity changes through how much they read. These are just specific exercises that you tailor make to suit the capacity of your own experience, right? On the next side to that, reading can train pattern recognition when you specifically look for recurrences. I think it was a case of identity. But I mean, I know the quote, the little things are infinitely the most important. Pattern recognition is the foundation of competence. I nearly said expertise, but then I was like, I don't really agree with the notion of expertise on a personal level, right? The issue is that most people will collect experiences without extracting the patterns from them. Their life just becomes a pile of moments. Reading can give you repeated exposure to structures, like motives, incentives, conflicts, logical fallacies, rhetorical moves. Patterns become visible when you can track recurrence. The brain learns by detecting regularities. So when you pay attention to recurring features, you build stronger mental models and you reduce the cognitive load later. So you can read anything. Patterns exist in fiction just as much as non-fiction. So with fiction, it might be motifs, relationship loops, um, deception cues, conflict escalation. With non-fiction, it might be argument templates, evidence types, persuasion techniques, right? They're all there. So if you bring some intentional practice to either of them, I mean, I think of it as a rule of three. Um, so as you read, mark anything on the page that occurs three times. Or if you're going by chapter, anything that occurs in the chapter three times. You know, that type of spacing concern. And then on the third occurrence, you go, what's the rule here? What's the writer training me to expect? What would break the pattern? That single habit turns reading into model building, right? You can, in certain circumstances, this is kind of pushing it a little in terms of pattern recognition, because you're the thing is about understanding the understanding human behavior, but from how the minds of the individuals are modeled, not the behavior, not the movements, this type of thing. But that's all filtered through whoever it is that's writing, you know. Um, Best quote to sum that up would be, um, I never guess. It is a shocking habit and destructive to the logical faculties. Social error comes from, mind reading, but badly. Someone projecting motives or attributing intent or assuming character traits from just one act. I'm looking at you, experts. Reading can give you a controlled laboratory to practice the theory of mind. So, as in what a person believes, what they want, what they fear, what they hide. Fiction can be a simulator that way. Oh, Mr. Jane says, I think pattern recognition would also be useful for understanding the author's template for chapters, which would lead us to comprehend faster. Never thought about it like that. Wow moment for me. I've commented from Twitch. Jennifer Jarrett. Sorry if I'm bugging you, but yo, I whipped up some sick art for a streamer. Want to peep it? I'm going to be honest with you, Jennifer. I'm not entirely sure what that means. Um, I'm going to be straight with you. Are you asking me if I want to have a look at some art? Um, sure. Back to the books. Fiction in that particular circumstance. Sorry, that really threw me. I didn't understand that breakdown at all. Apologise, Jennifer, but I didn't know what you meant. Um, so non-fiction then is a case file. When you practice understanding perspectives, you strengthen your ability to represent other people's mental states, especially in complex situations. So again, you can read anything to try and get your head around these kinds of things. Every text contains, these agents of sorts, like characters, authors, sources being quoted, people being described. You can model all of them. It takes this intentional practice. If you want to just sit down and enjoy what you're reading, do that. But if you want to sit down and you haven't had the opportunity to practice, then these are ways that you can go about doing that. This from whatever you're reading, pick a key person. So whether it's a character or a real figure, right? And from what you understand about them, how would you describe what they believe is true? How would you describe what they want? How would you describe what they are avoiding, or what they can't say out loud? Then you check the next chapter or the next section or the next bit that's coming up, and then you factor in, so what was held up? What collapsed? What needs revision? It's a practicing of calibrated compassion, not sentimentality. Reading, unsurprisingly, can also be memory training. When you retrieve instead of reread, right? I consider that a man's brain originally is like a little empty attic. People feel their memory is getting worse en masse, and they choose to outsource it to devices. But then they practice remembering even less. That loop is so real. And reading offers an opportunity to break it, because it offers endless chances to practice retrieval without needing, special equipment, or an app or a service, or an agent, or somebody taking notes for you. Retrieval strengthens memory. Rereading often, not all the time, but often creates a familiarity with the text, not recall. If you want information you can use, you need to practice pulling it out. And again, you can read anything in this sense, because it's a memory training drill. Right? Memory training works on plot just as much as it works on arguments, and definitions just as much as it works on lists. And usually, in both fiction and non-fiction, there are cause and effect change. The content is the weight, the retrieval is the lift. Right. So again, with the with the capacity things that are on the table, you can choose to make it a 60-second recall, a 10-minute recall, a half an hour recall, that type of thing. But let's just think of it this way in terms of it being a minute. So after reading for a minute, close the book, and then say out loud, I shit you not, say out loud a verbal summary in your approximation of 60 seconds. And then you write down 3 bullets from what it is that you've just said. Reopen it and then check for missing or distorted parts. That's how you turn reading into usable memory. You know, I mean, we can go critical thinking again with the um, there is nothing more deceptive than an obvious fact, I believe, is the Boscombe Valley Mystery. Um, I know the quotes. I don't know where they come from. A lot of the time, I don't know where they come from with as much certitude as I know the quotes, if that makes sense. Um, but many people think they can spot a lie, and fewer still can spot an assumption. Assumptions are the real puppeteers. And any Reacher fan will know, Reacher TV show will know that in an investigation, assumptions kill. Reading offers a slow motion view of how claims are built. That is a practice ground for one of my methods that I call the reasoning funnel. We've done a podcast on that previously. If you look at the science of just understanding, right? I'm thinking of it in basic terms. I don't really want to bore you with the whole study terminology of it all. Understanding improves when you actively connect claims to evidence and identify the gaps. The skill is not just being, skeptical. The skill is being structurally precise, because every paragraph will tend to contain a claim of some sort, a reason, an implied therefore moment, a hidden premise. Those are just as true in romance novels as they are in research papers. So you can take intentional practice in the way of a premise extraction. Whatever you're reading, take one strong sentence and write, what must be true for this to be true? What would disprove it? What evidence would actually support it? These kinds of questions. What you're really training is like a reasoning integrity. You're not just training blind acceptance. So therefore, you can also, and I keep saying the big heavy word, can also, you can also use reading to train emotional regulation. So when you notice your reactions, they can be data. My mind rebels at stagnation. Give me problems, give me work, give me the most abstruse cryptogram, the most intricate analysis, and I am in my proper atmosphere. Then I can disperse the artificial stimulants. Most people think emotional regulation just means staying calm. That's a great question, Karate Elvis. We'll come back to that. That's a great question. We'll come back to that. We'll go through this bit, and then we'll come back to that question. That's a great question. Seemingly because I've said that's a great question like 63 times. The regulation of emotion is broader than simple calmness. It's noticing shifts early, it's understanding triggers, it's recovering quickly, it's choosing response. Reading reliably evokes emotion, right? That makes it, or rather that can make it, a practice arena where you can observe your own system if you choose to. Now I'm spending a lot of time focusing on the can, but I don't want to I don't want to create this false impression for you guys that reading will do all of this by simple virtue of reading. It is about bringing a specific intention to it when you're sitting down to read, right? That's the key. So your emotions shape your attention and therefore your memory. If you can notice emotional influence while reading, you can notice it while deciding or interviewing or negotiating or profiling. So if a text bores you or irritates you or thrills you or makes you defensive, you have training material. The feeling is not a problem. It's a signal. So whenever you feel a spike, whatever it is, interest, annoyance, certainty, disgust, whatever it is, make a note of what did the text do right before the spike? What story did I attach to it immediately, whether it's a memory or a projection of the things that are to come? What did I want to do next as a result? Did I want to just scroll my time away, argue with somebody, quit, agree, whatever it is? We are practicing self-observation under stimulus, right? So can reading silently still help with your speaking skills? There is a trade-off in that situation, right? Because there is a lot of dependency of what it is that you hear in your head as you're reading. And in a nutshell, reading and speaking, two very different psychological and neurological processes. When you look at some of the, like, if you've ever watched The King's Speech, for example, there's a great illustration of a classic experiment in there when Colin Firth's character goes to see Geoffrey Rush's character, and Colin Firth has this terrible stammer, as one of our kings had. And so Geoffrey Rush's character puts him some very loud music on and tasks him to read a book. And he reads it perfect. So there's connection between the inner monologue and the spoken sense of it, right? So in terms of where its benefits lie, is the controlled proceedings of what you're doing through each moment. You can take a lot from the emotional regulation side of things to have reading help your speaking skills, in that what you're reading, do you notice any shifts in how you think about the material as you're going through it? You know, does your mind wander off? Do you suffer from the spotlight effect of people thinking that they're all of you thinking that people are looking at you while you're reading? You know, these types of things. It is about control over the inner as it connects to the outer. Bear in mind, I'm not a speech therapist. This is just as how I understand the things that I've read about. Accidental. So there'd be much more learned people than I to talk about these specific differences. What I would say with using reading to help you practice your speaking skills is making sure that you intentionally take the opportunity to say out loud these things that you're reading. Right? If you feel more comfortable doing that in the privacy of your own space, then that's where it starts. But if it is that you get to, let me grab this, and there we go, chapter 34. I've just opened on, and I've read this before. I'm going to do a review on Vitamin X by Anthony Mativier. Very good book. Talking about reading as a result of practice. Now I can look at this, and I can go through and hear the words in my head. There we go. That's just the first paragraph, and then for it to become chapter 34. Call it a vision or call it a dream, my entrance into the life of Michael Mailskircher started like the universe, with a bang. The instant I opened my eyes, Dr. Kimball Sr. smashed his chair against a large glass window overlooking Deep Cove. Now that didn't sound the same as I heard it in my head. So there's different processes. So you can get to a normalcy, a comfort with differing words and descriptions and content and ideas being thrown at you. But the intentional practice on the backside of that should be saying these things out loud. All right. Really make a concerted and conscious effort to take a journey between those differences. Okay. And the last point I want to make about reading is reading as a way of training your attention, rather your attention endurance. You know, Sherlock's was I cannot live without brain work. Attention is almost treated nowadays like a public utility. Notifications, feeds, pings, tabs, they all treat your focus like an open buffet. Sustained reading is one of the cleanest ways to rebuild attentional stamina because it forces continuity. And again, right, just this has just popped into my head as I was saying it. If I sound differently speaking about this, it's because I've written notes on these things. when I got to Karate Elvis's question, I'm having to process the information that I'm aware of and speak it out differently, so I sound differently. That's the different practiced elements between speaking about the things that I've read. I remember a strange at a thrift, and when I was looking through at the books, he mentioned he hasn't owned a TV in 10 years and replaced it with books. I admired that man. I mean, that sounds glorious. That does sound glorious. And if my comfort watches weren't continuously going through, Sherlock Holmes or Psych episodes, I would happily do the same. Happily. Anyway, if you constantly interrupt yourself, your brain learns that interruption is a normal rhythm. So attention endurance is content agnostic. A simple book can still train long focus if you remove escape routes. So again, bring some intention to it. When you're sitting down to read, 20 minutes, you know, take your phone out of the room, or one text only, no highlights until the end. And then at the end, you take stock of how many urges you had to stop, what triggered them, what helped you continue. That is attention becoming trained, not hoped for. Right? So, if you have enjoyed this episode, do please let me know in the comments section below. And if you haven't subscribed to the podcast already, now is your time to read the little notification bell and do that at the same time. And I shall see you next week. All right, guys, take it easy.